The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a resolution to restrain President Donald Trump from military operations against Iran. The non-binding war powers resolution reins in the president's ability to attack Iran in the future without congressional approval.
It also says the president does not have the authority to engage in war with Iran. The House voted 224 to 194 in favor of the motion, mostly along party lines. 3 Republicans and 1 independent sided with the Democrats, while 8 Democrats voted with Republicans against the resolution. Earlier, Congress was not consulted on the assassination of Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani. Meanwhile, President Trump said he has approved new sanctions on Iran after the missiles strike on U.S. troops in Iraq. Talking to media at the White House, Trump said the sanctions were already very severe, but now they have been increased substantially. In a related development, France has refused Washington's call to exit the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. French Foreign Ministry said Paris remains committed to the framework of the Vienna-Iran nuclear accord.
The United Nations has once again urged the U.S. and Iran to resolve their differences through dialogue. Delegates from 60 countries took part in an open debate at the UN Security Council on U.S.-Iran tensions. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Kelly Craft said Washington is open to returning to the negotiating table. Iran's Ambassador Majid Takht Ravanchi expressed distrust of the U.S., calling the missile attacks self-defense. He denounced the increased U.S. economic sanctions on Iran and called the Trump administration an unhinged regime.
The world is at a crossroads. With the end of monopolies on power, one unhinged regime is frantically clamoring to turn back time. This has meant more damaging American unilateralism in defiance of international norms and law. Most recently, a dastardly targeted assassination of the heroes who were the nightmare of groups such as ISIS.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Middle Eastern states should join the North Atlantic Alliance. Speaking at the White House, Trump said he suggested the expansion to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in a meeting. Trump said he asked NATO to boost its involvement in the Middle East peace process. President Trump even suggested a name for the new alliance.
I spoke to Secretary General yesterday, and we had a great conversation. He was very, I think he was actually excited by it. And I actually had a name, NATO, right? And then you have ME, Middle East. You'll call it NATOME. I said, what a beautiful name, NATOME. I'm good at names, right?
Western leaders say it is highly likely Iran shot down Ukrainian plane that crashed near Tehran late on Tuesday.
US, Canadian and British officials say the strike could have been a mistake, with rocket launches and high tension in the region. They said the airliner, which crashed killing all 176 people on board, ignored flight prohibition orders issued by the US Federal Aviation Administration. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said intelligence from the multiple sources indicates the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and US President Donald Trump shared similar views. Iran has denied claims and invited the US to join probe and called on Canada to hand over information regarding the crash. The US National Transportation Safety Board has accepted the Iranian invitation. Iran has already sent an official notification and a preliminary accident report to the International Civil Aviation Organization. Meanwhile, the International Civil Aviation Organization has advised against speculation until the investigation is concluded.
Moving on to India, where the Supreme Court has ruled that the indefinite communication shutdown by the BJP government in the occupied Kashmir is unconstitutional. In its verdict on petitions challenging the restrictions in the occupied valley, the court said internet access is part of freedom of speech. It also ruled the government cannot crack down on genuine protests in the territory. The judges said the communication blackout had gravely impacted the freedom of the press. It noted that the government administration in the Indian-occupied Kashmir did not issue any written orders for the curbs. It pointed out that no official directives arguing the reasons for the communication lockdown and curfew were presented to the court. The verdict directs the BJP administration in Indian-occupied Kashmir must review its curbs and present a written review within a week. An Indian government report shows one woman was raped every 15 minutes on average in 2018. This reaffirms India's dismal reputation as one of the worst places in the world to be for women. The criminal report released by the Ministry of Home Affairs shows 34,000 rapes incidents were reported in 2018, out of which only 27% accused were convicted. Women rights groups say crimes against women are often taken less seriously. They say police lack sensitivity while investigating such cases. The government statistics understate the number of rapes as it is still considered a taboo to report rape in India. Yemen's government have signed a new agreement with the Southern Transitional Council to implement the Saudi broker deal. Under the new pact, both parties agreed to withdraw forces from the port city of Aden. Saudi Arabia's ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed Al-Jaber, has confirmed the deal signing. He said the second phase will include the return of all forces that moved from their main sites and camps toward Aden, Abyan and Shabwa. An appointment of a governor and director to Aden will also be made under the agreement. The pact will also include taking steps to implement the withdrawal under the supervision of the Arab coalition. Last year, Saudi Arabia persuaded the STC and the Yemeni government to hold reconciliation talks. The East Libyan strongman General Khalifa Haftar has rejected calls for a truce encouraged by Russia and Turkey. Haftar said he will not stop military operations against forces loyal to the Tripoli administration. The Libyan National Army said a revival of the political process could only be guaranteed by the eradication of terrorist groups. On Wednesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin called for a Libyan ceasefire. The UN-recognized Government of National Accord and Qatar have welcomed the Ankara-Moscow peace initiative. Europe and North Africa have launched a diplomatic offensive to prevent Libya becoming another Syria. Heavily armed assailants have killed 25 soldiers in an attack on a military base in western Niger. The Defense Ministry spokesman Suleiman Ghazoubi says 63 terrorists have also been killed in clashes on the town of Tilaberi. Ghazoubi said the attack coincides with a campaign by ISIS and Al-Qaeda to force the Nigerian army back from its western frontier with Mali. He expressed condolences for the victims' families.
The Minister of Defense, in the name of the President of the Republic, Supreme Chief of the Army, and in the name of the government, presents saddened condolences to the victims' families and wish for the swift recovery of the wounded.
No one has yet claimed responsibility for this attack. More in this bulletin. In Angola, torrential rain has killed 41 people and affected over 2,000 families. In a statement, the Interior Minister Eugenio Labrenjo said 12 out of 18 provinces were hit by the violent downpour. He said more than 300 homes were destroyed by flooding, while water and power supplies have been cut off in some areas. The rain comes on the heels of a regional drought caused by years of erratic rainfall and record high temperatures. Moving on to Britain, the House of Commons has approved Prime Minister Boris Johnson's withdrawal agreement bill, allowing the country to leave the EU on the January 31st. Lawmakers voted 330 to 231 in favor of the legislation. The vote ends more than 3 years of impasse over the divorce deal. The legislation will now head to the House of Lords next week, where it will be scrutinized by peers. It is likely to pass through all stages and receive royal assent before entering the statute of books. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Hundreds of demonstrators have broken into the president's office in Georgia's breakaway region of Abkhazia, demanding his resignation. The protesters claim there were widespread irregularities in the re-election of President Raul Kajimba for a second term in September. Opposition leader AFGHANISTAN is demanding authorities review the election results. The region of Abkhazia broke away from Georgia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. President Kajimba threatened to introduce a state of emergency in the region if the situation deteriorates.
Всем хорошо известно то, что произошло сегодня. Практически мы должны сохранять спокойствие.
In this difficult situation, we must stay calm and not threaten the existence of our state. All public authorities work in a standard way. The work of security forces was enhanced. If necessary, I will take steps to declare a state of emergency in the country.
In France, tens of thousands of demonstrators have taken to streets as the latest mass protest against pensions overhaul enters the 37th day. Employees are demanding the government to take back the plan that asks them to retire later or face reduced payouts. Protesters hurled stones against police who tried to disperse the violent crowds with tear gas. Police officials said at least 24 people have been detained in Paris. The government has unveiled 2 bills committing to raise the salary for teachers and researchers. However, the unions are unlikely to agree to the measures. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe will meet the labor leaders today to further discuss the solution. Japan and the Philippines have agreed to strengthen bilateral maritime security cooperation in the South China Sea. Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi and Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte made the agreement at a meeting in Manila. Duterte expressed gratitude to Japan for its years of support. Earlier, Foreign Minister Motegi met with Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs Teodoro Lozin. Lozin told Motegi Philippines had removed restrictions imposed on food imports from Japan's Fukushima. Motegi welcomed the move, saying it will boost food exports. In Australia, authorities have asked over 200,000 more people to leave their homes as bushfires spread across the east coast. The government has also prepared military backup with soaring temperatures and erratic winds fueling bushfires. In the Bulletin region between Victoria and New South Wales states, 2 fires are poised to merge and create a blaze of 600,000 hectares. In Victoria, authorities have asked people to get out and head for the remote and forested parts of the state. Australia's Department for Environment and Water has decided to kill 10,000 camels because of the extreme heat and drought. Firefighters are continuing to battle out-of-control bushfires, which have killed 26 people so far. As thoughts of bushfire crisis hang in the air, hundreds of Elvis Presley fans have begun their annual pilgrimage to the ELVIS festival in Australia. The king of rock and roll lookalike said the event is important to support tourism in regional towns. More about the fun enthusiasts in this report.
Revelers in their diamond-encrusted jumpsuits and colored wigs rocked and rolled to some of the King's greatest hits at Sydney's Central Railway Terminal before catching the Elvis Express to the rural town of Parkes.
The world is crazy at the moment, so people who are depressed and all need something to lift themselves up. So festivals like this takes you to a different world. You leave all your troubles behind and just enjoy yourself.
While the town hasn't been directly affected by the bushfires, many have cancelled their trips, but some think differently.
The Elvis Festival normally contributes $14–15 million to the park's economy every year, and it's so vital in a year like this that continues to happen.
The Elvis Express had to adjust its route to avoid fire-damaged tracks in the Blue Mountains region.
In Afghanistan, the archaeologically rich province of Bamiyan is facing a daunting threat from climate change after already bearing the brunt of war. The Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative ranks Afghanistan 173 out of the 181 countries in terms of its vulnerability to climate change. More in this report.
Nestled in the heart of the Hindu Kush Mountains, the war-torn Bamiyan Valley still contains picturesque temples, monasteries, and Buddhist paintings. But frequent dry spells, followed by heavy rain and larger spring snowmelts, have put historic architecture at risk of destruction.
It's not how it was in its former state. There's a lot of snow and a huge number of visitors coming. If they work on it, it will be gradually destroyed by rain, snow, and earthquakes.
In a 2016 UN report, Afghan officials warned the structures could collapse because of severe conditions from climate change. Archaeologists say the erosion is increasing. Some believe the real danger to sites comes from human influence.
As you can see, the city is in a state of disrepair and collapse, and that has been increasing day by day. The reason is that there are a huge number of visitors, and also most people are not familiar with the culture of how to behave with historical sites.
Mitigating the impacts of erosion would cost billions of dollars in Afghanistan. It is a task the country in its current condition would be hard-pressed to take on.
In Vietnam, an all-female demining team is on a mission to clear landmines that have killed tens of thousands of people since the end of the Vietnam War. Officials say more than 6 million hectares of land is still covered by explosives, threatening many more lives. More in this report.
Inching across a field littered with war-era bombs, a female demining team clears unexploded ordnance, dropped mainly by U.S. forces during the Vietnam War. At least 40,000 Vietnamese have been killed by such devices since the war. Victims are often farmers who accidentally trigger explosions or children who mistake bomblets for toys.
My husband was injured by unexploded ordnance when he went to work in the past. That is my motivation to do this job, so nobody will be in the same situation as my husband.
Clearing the entire country could take up to 100 years and could cost billions of dollars. Such statistics don't deter the team from this highly dangerous work.
This is not about money. Our job is to make a better place and ensure a safer land for the people without any accidents from the bombs. So we see our job as very meaningful.
Once the land is cleared, residents want to return it to agricultural use.
U.S. President Donald Trump says talks for the second phase of a pending trade deal with China will begin soon. He added the outcome may wait until after this year's elections. Trump's remarks come days before Beijing's trade envoy is due in Washington to sign a Phase 1 agreement. The U.S. leader also cast doubt on whether American farmers would be able to supply China with the massive increase in agricultural exports. Observers suggest there may be little appetite for Phase 2 as some tariffs put in place during the trade conflict are still in effect. Stock markets in Asia are trading mixed following the ease in tensions between the US and Iran. Investor sentiments are weak as they are still recovering from losses incurred during panic sell-off. Seoul's Kospi is trading 0.5% higher. LG gained over 1%, while Samsung Electronics stocks edged up 0.5% each. The Shanghai Composite has so far lost nearly 0.5%. Nikkei 225 is trading fractionally higher after Family Mart stock surged over 2% ahead of its third quarter results. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is trading flat. Oil prices have dropped as the threat of war in the major oil-producing Middle East region receded. Brent crude is trading at $65 a barrel after falling over 4% in the last 2 days. US WTI crude oil slipped lower to $60 per barrel after it plunged 5% on Wednesday. Oil prices have recovered to where they were before a US drone strike killed a top Iranian general on January 3rd. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.